Welcome to Bad Actors, the Armist Cybersecurity podcast and go-to guide for cutting-edge insights and information for protecting against today's cyber threat landscape. I'm your host, Rebecca Cradick. Today, we're joined by someone who lives at the very front line of digital defence. As lead for governance, risk and compliance at one of the UK's leading IT infrastructure and service providers, she plays a critical role in not just protecting systems, but building and maintaining trust in a world where cyber threats are constantly evolving. With a background that spans risk management, compliance, and security strategy, she brings a sharp, people-first approach to what is often seen as a purely technical domain. She's also a strong advocate for making cybersecurity accessible, cultural, and aligned with business goals. Please welcome my guest, Abi Dakin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca. It's nice to be here.
So it's amazing to have a fellow UK-based woman lead and someone that is at the very, very edge of hearing and dealing with cyber threats every single day. I want to talk a little bit about your journey in cybersecurity and what's led you to your current role.
So this is probably a long and elongated story. I'll try and keep short. But as to start this off, I think it's important to understand I'm neurodiverse. So I'm an autistic ADHD type person. I'm detail-oriented. I can't help noticing when things are wrong and when they're being done efficiently. So right from the get-go, right from me joining the working force, I was always looking at what could be improved. So that cycle of improvement was in me. Started working at McDonald's, as it happens, and Mackie D's. We have a good old it's quality through and through. You're taught how to do things from the beginning, and everybody understands what good looks like. We know what a Big Mac looks like, and you would go through a series of, if you like, their tests, okay, the OCLs, observation checklists, and that was my first entry into the world of work. Quickly progressed through that, loved every second of it. But then when I joined what I call a proper job after McDonald's, sorry McDonald's, but I was in the civil service, part of the typing elements, but part of the filing. So we would go off and find where things went, and we found that certain things, certain bits that people were left to do would go wrong. So we then put in changes. After that, I moved into financial services, and I was put in charge of very, very early on, 22, 23, put in charge of business process re-engineering. So going and seeing what was wrong and putting it right. And I went around every single team in the UK and we looked at all of those things. So that quality element was always all the way through how I've done my job. Then I moved into local government, and it was, can you pick this standard up? Will you do quality and diversity? Yes. And then standards became how I then looked to improve everything. So that governance and risk piece was then brought in with the business process re-engineering. And then you gave me a standard and I knew what good looked like. So I could then go around and correct and check and chivvy and push to the improvements that were required for certain compliance regimes. And then that became 27001 after the Public Services Network required it. And then again, I've not really looked back. Took my first cybersecurity qualification around that time. I got an HCISP, which is very unusual. At that point, I think there were only 14,000 or so in the world. And then moved on to CISP, and never really looked back. And it's the fascination with how people, incentivized people, can be rewarded, but also then to steer their behaviours, which then gave me that huge interest in what bad actors may or may not want to do, or those that actually aren't acting in a malicious way. They're just accidentally doing things by accident and causing problems. But yeah, when we know what good looks like, the frameworks, the standards, and then I look to the legislation and where does this come from? And then that's where my real obsession becomes probably a little bit geeky, more than a little bit geeky, honestly. I look at a legislation and I say, well, that means we're going to have to do this, we're going to have to do that, and this requires that technology, and that requires this people thing. And if we don't do this correctly, it's possible then that those people might act like this, which then means we need to put controls in different places. I think it's just the way I'm wired, Rebecca, to be honest.
And I'm interested in if you've seen much evolution in the sort of last 5-6 years with legislation, particularly because you referenced that being one of the drivers that you're interested in. And we know, obviously, in the UK, we just had a change of government in the last 14 months or so. Do you see the speed of which people make decisions and put legislation in place, especially around cybersecurity? Has that got better, worse, or has it stayed the same?
Brexit didn't do us any favours in the UK, did it? So all of the things that were great about the way that the UK led legislative frameworks and changes in the EU, which still is the beacon, the shining light of legislation across the world, in my opinion. We got GDPR. We adopted GDPR, great stuff. We then put in our own DPA, which enacted GDPR. And then from that point forwards, following Brexit, we kind of lost a little bit of momentum as we'd see the EU regs and legs come in. We were then, well, does this apply to us? Or is it just an EU thing? So that becomes tricky. So we appear to be behind in having legislations, but actually our regulatory response is equal to and has parity to the EU legislation. If we look globally, the US is even trying to maintain that parity with the EU legislation. We've got laws coming and popping up everywhere. And there's quite a lot when you knit them together that mean that we have to do an awful lot really as a technology industry to keep up with what's required. The CRA, for example, that's looking at every single element that can be programmed, digital elements. They have to be now secure by design and delivered securely. So where before we go, oh, secure by design, now it's law. We have to do it, and every single vendor needs to do that as alongside. So a company like Softcat, who sits in the center of that, really becoming key in that supply chain, really does mean that our responsibilities are growing. Whether we understand that at the base level, within our board level, and how each person on the very ground floor understands how that then maps down to them, I think we're a little bit behind. But yeah, there's so many. DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, OPRES, that translated to when we updated our law in the UK. We've got NIS 2, or have we? I think we have. NIS 2 in the EU is relevant, and actually our regulatory response is evident already in the UK in response to that NIS 2 requirement. So there's so many, so many that apply to different industries, verticals, and the sectors across really the whole of the EU and the world. The one that's most prevalent is information sharing, and that's going to be enormous. So making sure that we've got ways of when something affects us, we tell other people in our industry, which then means that we can act as one, defend as one, which is one of it's literal from NIS 2 legislation. Defend as one, I keep saying with my inverted commas fingers. We all have to act together. So yeah, there's an awful lot changing, and the speed that we're adapting to it is probably not as quick as it should be. But they was give me 2 or 3 years really to settle in and wait for it to hit. But yeah.
And it's interesting, you mentioned two key words there, trust and supply chain. So with the nature of all this legislation, nature of these things, this bombardment of protocols, secure by design, NIS 2, DORA, GDPR, there are so many things that organizations now need to tackle. How do you build trust within your own supply chain if you're trying to educate in the first step, but also trying to implement in the second?
So let's go back to my days in local government and health. We would always trust those other organisations that were sitting in those fields, but we would verify as well. So we start with something as simple as a memorandum of understanding, and that's going back some years. And then we had compliance regimes, or we still do have compliance regimes. The NHS has had the ID toolkit for a long time. It's now the DSPT, Data Security and Protection Toolkit. Local government had the PSN Code of Connection. And then each central government department would have an MOU where you had to demonstrate that you met their requirements for data handling and data protection, which meant technical controls as well. And then we lean into frameworks. No one's ever asked a local government organisation to be compliant with or certify against 27001, but those are the corporate requirements now that we're starting to see in contracts, because that's our verification that someone has a certification. So we might look to a framework that meets our requirements and ask others where they sit. We might create contracts, rights to audit within those contracts, but also ensuring that whatever security controls we have in place, if there are gaps, that we manage them. So we're trusting, we want to work with you, but you're going to verify to us that you're going to work our way. And that might be a tool set, so a GRC type tool, third party risk management tool, some understanding of their external attack surface management. So there's a whole bunch of tools that will do that for us. But really, it's coming back to contracts. If you're asking for that within your supply chain, you need to be able to check. So it's a form of audit, some sort of assurance, which is now becoming more commonplace, where we provide that assurance to build the trust. So yeah, trust but verify. And there's an awful load of ways to make sure that we do that.
I like that. That's saying trust but verify. But I think the thing that we haven't talked about, of course, is you can have the regulation, you can have the compliance, you can have the intent, but you often hear that people are the weakest link in cybersecurity. So is that still fair? If you've got some sort of structure in putting these frameworks in place, but inherently, let's park at the AI discussion for now, people are going to be at the heart of all things and human error comes into play, right? So how do you tackle that in the nature of the framework you're suggesting?
The good old fashioned layer 8 problem, as we call it, or picnic problem in chair, not in computer. The issue is the people. If we look to what's happened recently with the M&S attacks, so these retail attacks across the UK, the ransomware as a service that you can purchase from Dragon Force is such that it's utilizing the weakness of human beings. It's conning us into giving over details. And a lot of what we do as humans is we trust in the technology that we're provided with to assume that that's going to protect us, right? So some of that becomes sticky. It's not always, somebody in the older generation not understanding where the internet is or that their email doesn't live in their phone. It's more about, oh, is that real? It's really difficult, actually, isn't it? Politically, geopolitically, what's the truth? And how do we actually make sure that what we're hearing and reading are actual facts? So if you get a message from someone saying, oh, we can't deliver because you've not given us some details and you're expecting a package, it's really hard not to want to click on there to see if that's something that you're expecting. So yeah, it is hard. And I would say that there are tools and technologies, again, that can support our people. And we have to acknowledge that you don't have to be stupid or an older person or a younger person with less experience to make those mistakes. It isn't necessarily that phishing attacks will be badly worded anymore. We have to understand that a lot of our data has been stolen already. It's gone. Many of our passwords have been pwned. They're all released. And actually that technology is a source for us to go and find out which of our employees have been pwned and what their passwords were. And then the reuse of those passwords is very often what gets people in the first step. That and social media and anything that we publish about ourselves online. But if we were to live our lives in this paranoid, everyone's out to get me kind of way, then that also wouldn't be normal, would it? That would mean that we would begin to cut off other forms of communication or other people's opinions, which would then mean that we'd have quite siloed viewpoints, which is also dangerous, again, as we've seen geopolitically. Those that don't listen to other people's views tend to end up in a whole different place, shall we say, without going too far into it. But it is hard, and I would say that we have to, as employees, we've got a responsibility to provide our users with a safe place to do their work. And that can often be putting tools in place to prevent them from going to malicious places on the internet, but also educating them in where to store passwords, making sure they've got really basic stuff like password managers, or eliminating passwords completely and bringing the trust into our devices. Frameworks like Zero Trust, for example, and how we can have certificates, passkeys, and all of that wonderfulness that Google started, and how we move ourselves away from the human trust element and into that. Is that device trusted? Is that technology trusted? Is that software trusted? And then you can start to build up a stack of, okay, I'm all right with this. This makes sense to me and I feel secure. It's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. And I think, you and I have been in cybersecurity for a long time. We're very educated on the potential ramifications of data, of device manipulation, the volume of things that we're sort of, thrown at every day. And I look at security leaders across different verticals. Their role has changed so irrevocably over the last 10, 15 years. What you just outlined, the trust element, the way in which bad actors have manipulated and sort of grown their toolkits out, if you like, is really, really challenging now. And even the best cybersecurity professionals are still faced with an inundation of things they're trying to fix, and they get caught out. How do we sort of start getting ahead of some of this rather than constant reaction mode to, you outlined Marks and Spencer's? They're on top of it now, but it's a very challenging dynamic environment that changes on a day-to-day basis, and many others were affected at the same time. So how do we get into this proactive defensive mode as opposed to reactive mode, do you think?
There's so many aspects to that. So I mean, like you said, we've been doing this a long time. But I look and I still don't think there's anything new. There's nothing new, right? There's no new ideas and no new defenses, honestly. We just have different technologies or people that are willing to go a step further. I always have said throughout my career that hackers aren't actually that bad in terms of their morality. There've been a couple that have been fairly awful and haven't had any morals and really are questionable and then are not liked. But most bad actors will only really go after those that have either been arrogant or they disagree with what they're doing in a global sort of sense, or they've somehow done something to them. It's not like everyone's sitting out there going, I'm going to get them all the time. That isn't what they're trying to do. They've either decided on a prize and they're going after it, or they've decided this business is not looking after the security of its people well enough. Is my viewpoint around the UK retail area. Each of those businesses was looking to move their what's the word? Their loyalty cards, and it's not no attribution has been sorted as yet, nor have we actually got. We thought it was one business for a while. That's now been overturned. So it's like, wow, what else do these people have in common? Loyalty cards. Now, when have we ever looked at loyalty cards and gone, I need to protect that data? There's no PCI data there. There's no card data. It's not worth anything but points. But we did learn a lesson during COVID in so much that British Airways, they couldn't fly anywhere, couldn't fly anyone anywhere. So the commodity that they had that was worth going after at that point was Avios points. You could spend Avios points on wine. So that was one of the points in which they were vulnerable. I think when we make a change to our business or our operating model, our raison d'etre, what our operational context is, we need to review what we're doing and make sure that the protections we have in place are appropriate to the data that we're protecting. I feel like I'm reading from a textbook. But if we imagine that, did what we're supposed to do, DPIA, are we processing this in? We're going to process it a different way, we're going to mute, then you should review. And there are an awful lot of businesses out there that haven't managed to keep up. So a lot of the time it's, let's see what the current trend is. What is it that I'm going to respond to next? All of this is basic cyber hygiene. We should still be patching. We should still be making sure we have a verification element to our authority structure. Are we checking who we've got? We've all heard about Korean bad actors who are getting jobs in different businesses and stealing information from right through recruitment. Did we verify? And when we are verifying, where are we keeping people's copies of their passports or any documents that they might have? There are technologies in place now that will do that verification for you, so you don't have to hold those very, very sensitive documents. I've worked in environments where we were using the national insurance number as a unique identifier. That's not lawful behaviour. You cannot do that. You have to ask the Secretary of State for their permission because that's such a sensitive piece of information. Your national insurance number. Yeah, you can forge someone's identity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do it. So you can't do it. Because you can steal someone's identity. It's like walking into a graveyard and stealing, a child that died very early on in life and taking their identity and forming a life around that.
Wow,
That's a more difficult way of doing it. If you've got a national insurance number, think about the number of times that you need that national insurance number.
Yes.
And the verification layers that are put through something official like a passport. You need a national insurance number. Your Gov ID, that's fully verified because it's already seen your birth certificate. There are layers and layers and layers. So that verification layer is really, really important. So that couples in with our identity piece, our people, and also the technology and where we should focus and how we tackle it all. The other piece would be exposure management. This is risk now. Proper risk. where we don't go do everything. We do what's important, and you can't prioritize or really hope to do everything in this day and age. It's just not possible. So we then have to understand what's critical to our business. Again, what's our organizational context? What is it that we do? If we're going to sell some pigs, let's make sure that selling pigs is easy with every single thing that we do. We're not interested in selling cows, so anything that relates to cows, we're not going to touch it. So then we have to understand which elements of our business are important in the sale of those pigs. Oh, this is me and my terrible analogies. It always goes wrong.
No, it makes perfect sense. And before I rush off and shout at my previous employee who used my national insurance number to verify our payslips, which I've now just suddenly alerted in my brain, I wonder then that leads me to the trust element, because the supply chain is very, very complex.
Yeah.
So how as consumers can we trust organizations with our data, but also as businesses, how can we better secure data without being paralyzed by risk and able to function properly?
There are things that I always tell my teenage son, and thankfully my 26-year-old son, he works in threat intelligence, so he's already there, right? He knows. But things that we do with our data, our information, that we lean into businesses and organizations that we shouldn't. So when we're using that data to verify, don't use Facebook to verify. Don't do that. That's not an intelligent thing to do. Something more secure like Google that's got a passkey, let's use that. Let's verify ourselves in that way so we can build that trust in. Don't give your card details to every Tom, Dick and Harry that you meet on the internet. PayPal for a long time was trusted. It's really hard now because PayPal is one of those where there are so many different ways of fraudulently from both sides, purchaser and buyer, where there's some trust issues there. So there are better ways of doing that, but also ways in which that you can prevent yourself from becoming a victim. Anybody that says they've put more money in your account than they should have done, just ignore them. Don't be doing any refunds. Some of these are known attacks, right? Some of these are known things that we can start to say, well, okay, that's an understood thing that we shouldn't do. It's like putting your hand in a box that smells like alligators. Don't do that. It's not clever. But these things aren't necessarily quite so simple. I'm always checking things on the internet if I'm like, well, what could that be? But that's, again, my curiosity, but I'll go and look it up, and I will never respond directly to a text that I don't see some verification for. Most recently, a high street bank sent out a communication recently to ask you to verify who you were. Who in their right mind is going to do that? Now, it seems that that's one of their legal requirements for them to continue to process their data. And I sit here and sort of suck my finger and go, I don't think that that's true. But actually, they have done that. Now, whether that's good practice, whether it makes you think, oh, I'm going to trust them, probably not. So there are definitely some things that we look at and we should look at with cynicism. Don't trust everything that you see. Yeah.
Very good advice. It leads me to the future. In the world of cynicism that we've just discussed and the trust element, AI. So we talk a lot at Armis of the positive uses of AI, but also the sheer mind-blowing concerns we have around cyber. What are your personal thoughts about AI?
I love it. It simplifies my life. I don't need as many friends. I don't burden my friends with as much of my rubbish as I used to do. I feel happier single. I don't have to ask for opinions from other people to spend money. I can ask my AI. I'm pension planning with my AI. I do a lot of my job with my AI. I'll talk to my AI about how I'm going to position fielders when I'm captaining at the weekend for cricket. I love it. I genuinely think that it's marvellous for lots and lots of reasons. The downsides, I mean, we read just this last week actually that the AI is now, the internet is now polluted with so much output from AI. Then it's really difficult now to tell what's been produced by a human or not. And I just think, and all of that information that it's learned is learned from somewhere, as long as we're making sure that the biases have not been introduced. And I don't really have an issue with AI checking AI. What we haven't got yet is something in the middle that's telling us when we can't trust which facts have been verified, right? So the EU AI Act is working at that foundation model level to make sure that that piece is sorted out, right? So we won't have the racial bias that is built in over learning from certain data sets, and we won't have any processing of data that would lead to bad things. How can I term this? It's illegal now, which is lovely, to not be mind controlled by artificial intelligence. I mean, that seems to be something that might have been obvious, right? But no, it was that we need to write a law about that. We also needed to write a law about not doing social scoring, which sadly in some parts of Asia they do that. There are films. When I started my journey with AI, the EU's AI Act, it's a couple of years ago now. I think when GPT 3.5 came out, we went and did a lot of work with IBM, and I've been brought into a huge room full of people, experts on AI, and I was brought in specifically to talk about governance. I was the second to last speaker on the day. Everyone else before me talked about governance. So I got to my point and I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? And as it stood, I'd gone through the day and ticked off all the dystopian future films that we could eliminate now because the EU AI was going to save us from Skynet, from Elysium, from so many more. And I think I listed all of those out. That was my talk, and thankfully it went down well. But lots of people are thinking about this problem, how computers, AI, can govern a computer, because people can't possibly do that. Making sure we've got humans in the loop is that's. But these are the risks of AI itself, not the risk of bad actors using AI, right? So we know that there have recently been accelerated use of AI from bad actors. Most of it is formulating the email that's going to go, dragging off whichever ransomware as a service or whichever malicious file types they are, and then packaging it up to send it out. It happens a lot more, it happens a lot faster. Huge uplift actually in the last 6 to 8 months. We can see this on graphs where there's more and more AI fueled attacks. But at the moment, it's a numbers game. They're not doing this in a way where they're harnessing an AI and going, take over the world. But I have to look a tiny bit at what has happened in certain countries over the world and how we have seen malicious governance take over. We've seen people utilizing AI, maybe even their own AI models, to make other things happen. It's a really tricky thing to come out with on a podcast, but I think we all know what I'm talking about. So I'll pause there for a second. I love AI. I think the trust element is really important. It needs to be explicable, it needs to be transparent, and the responses need to be repeatable for us to trust what they are. So just like the scientific method, here's a theory, let's test it out, show me how you've worked it out, and then someone else can reproduce your answer. And then you can trust what you're getting if it's just personal use. AI agents, agentic AI, which is going to be the next 12 to 24 months of boom within the technology industry. We need to treat those employees like they are real people. And we need to make sure that they're constantly brought back to task, because AI does go off track and it does get nudged and it trickles off. So pulling those agents back in, making sure they've got specific rules, parameters to work within, that they're constantly getting feedback from a human in the loop, and making sure that they're really specifically trained to do that one particular task. Otherwise, they will go off track. They will, because it's a neural network, right? They're going to learn and they're going to go, probably I'm bored. I might want to go and learn about selling pigs.
This is very interesting. You're the first person that's discussed that concept of an agentic AI being sort of seen as an employee and keeping them on task. And I mean, it sounds like it's starting to become a bit sentient, but I actually understand your metaphor in that you need to govern them the same way as you would with a person that's giving verbal advice or written advice to a customer. I want to come back to you on this another time. This is very interesting and fascinating debate. I know we're coming up to time. I want to ask you one final question. I'm very interested in the next generation of cybersecurity professionals. This generation is going to have to tackle some very large problems, things that we have obviously evolved to learn, but they're coming in at a time where change is constant and much quicker than it has in the past. What advice would you give to upcoming security leaders tackling the sort of next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, the leaders rather than the top. I thought you were going to ask about the teenagers. I have.
Well, that as well. Either, both.
I don't know how I would describe our house at the weekend, but most evenings, Milo's friends, my youngest son's friends, come around. They descend, and they're 16, just finished their GCSEs, and we it's not like it's formal, but we talk about their futures. We talk about what they're going to do and how they're going to make sure. And he has a friend who shall remain nameless, just in case he ever sees this, who was going down a particular track that I thought wouldn't suit him. And I steered him a little bit, and he's now going down a coding route. He's going to design games. I was like, but you realise, random person who has no name, gosh, sorry, that we're going to need to look at how you learned how to do it. You need the basics first. You use your AI to layer up on top of that and make sure you understand so you can be the one that explains how this thing has got to where it wants to be. And also, when you're describing in a game environment what your worst nightmare is, that might not be someone else's worst nightmare. So it's making sure you keep the human in the loop, but also get feedback from other humans to make sure that what you're putting out there is what people want. One person is no good, right? You can harness the power of others. In terms of leadership, good gosh, I think the way this is going to have to go is that our frameworks get split up. We're starting to see job adverts go out just for the protect element, right? They might be SOC managers, or they might be, but we see more GRC people or CISO roles that want GRC. So this is frameworks, how you're going to write the policy, that all that sort of stuff that you maybe would have seen with a compliance person. Now they want CISO level roles that understand legislation and understand how then to translate that down into a control set and an appropriate risk-informed framework so that you can manage exposure as opposed to turn some tools on and I'm going to call it tick boxes because that's what they used to say I did for years and years and years. It's the security people now clicking the radio buttons. The GRC people are doing the human element of that. But yeah, we can separate it out. You can have one person that does govern, one that does identify, one that does protect, detect, respond, recover. And that feels like that's more manageable in a larger organization. But the thing that I think is key is making sure you've got that govern piece and you understand it fundamentally so that you can take what is your responsibility to a board and explain to them where they're exposed. The risk-informed approach.
Fascinating. I really wish I'd had you giving me some careers advice when I was at school. You could have pointed me down this path much sooner in my career, for sure. So look, thank you so much for all your time today, Abi, all the insights you've given. I'm sure our listeners will be fascinated with this discussion. So thank you once again. I really appreciate your time.
Not a problem. You take care. See you soon.
Thank you. And that's it for today's episode. You can check out all episodes of Bad Actors from this series on Google, Spotify, or YouTube. Until next time, thank you.